joining. It's a great pleasure to have you aboard. I do hope that you're well. I hope you're feeling well. And I always say this on the Politicrat podcast that I do. Tough times do not last. Tough people like you do. I want you to keep that in mind on this Saturday. It's the Dr. King holiday weekend here in the United States, a federal holiday. I hope that you're going to be doing some positive things on Dr. King Day and any day. I wanted to actually talk about Dr. King's holiday and things that we should be doing. But first, I want to say a couple of things really quickly. One of them, um, gosh, I am so tempted to call his name on here, but I'm not going to. But I know that you know who I'm talking about. There are some people on Substack who are grifters. Some of them quite notorious grifters, very famous grifters. And one of them is currently hosting a live right now on Substack. I think you know who I'm talking about. And I read his news story that he writes. One of them that I read of his, oh boy, I tell you, so much self-interest. I can't believe I still free subscribe to him. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Christy. Good morning to you, Christy. Good morning, Victoria. Everybody, Karen, all of you who are joining right now. Thank you so very much indeed for joining. It's a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you for spending some precious time here with me on this Saturday. And Victoria, I totally agree with you. You know who he is. I don't even want to mention his name. You're free to if you want to. But Victoria, I totally agree. He's an absolute grifter. I can't believe I'm still free subscribing to him. I was never going to be a sucker to pay at all for when it comes to him. But I still free subscribe to him. But I'm strongly considering ending that now. I really, really should, because that thing he wrote, anyway, you get the idea. And he does. He's very rude, very defensive. Victoria, I couldn't agree more. I think I'll move on from that. I think we all know who we're talking about here. Chris, so we'll move on from that, because I don't want to get bogged down in people like that. Discernment's a key, right? We have to be discerning about who it is we subscribe to, listen to, trust, all the rest of it. So it's great to have you aboard. Thank you, Christy and others, for joining for the first time on a live in progress. I thank you for that. Thank you for subscribing. You can be a paid or free subscriber, whichever you choose. I'm fine with that. If you want to go paid, great. If you don't, it's understandable and quite fine with me. So thank you very much. A few things I want to talk about. I mentioned discernment and trust and things like that. And in an age of disinformation, that's very important. Now, having said that, I think if you listen to the Politicrat podcast that I do, I have told you that I am a subscriber to the Wall Street Journal. I am. I know who it's owned by. We all know who it's owned by. He's a very problematic person, but I've also talked about, despite the problematic editorial page, I've always talked about how the Wall Street Journal otherwise does some very good reporting. And of course, this is today's edition, Saturday, Sunday edition of the paper. There is a really ridiculously foolish story that the Wall Street Journal did today on these two. And bottom line is, without going too far into it, Joshua Chafin and Catherine Sayra essentially analogize Walter Cronkite and Joe Rogan in the same sentence. How on earth are you going to do that? I mean, that's where the Wall Street Journal, again, falls in the bad side of the column for doing a story on Joe Rogan, who is one of the most misinformed, hateful people there is, who have managed to have the world's most popular podcast. And the idea that Joe Rogan would call out Donald Trump is kind of laughable, isn't it? And it's an embarrassing story. I agree, Karen. It's an absolutely ridiculous story. Oh, he's losing the most important swing voter. What? It's just crazy. But again, and hello, Rebecca, to you. It's always great to see you here, Rebecca. Thank you so very much indeed. Just laughable stuff. And so I wanted to probably have mentioned that as a laugh here, because it is a joke on any paper, but the Wall Street Journal particularly. I'm not surprised at, even though I do subscribe to them. That's one of the places where they fall down, isn't it? To try to think that somehow Joe Rogan has some comparability to the great and the late great Walter Cronkite. They started the article by talking about how, as we know, those of us of a certain age, when Walter Cronkite and LBJ, all that kind of thing, when LBJ said, well, you know what, if we've lost Walter Cronkite on the Vietnam War, we've lost middle America. And they actually start pretty much with that in the article before going and suggesting that now, oh my God, Trump's in trouble because he's lost Joe Rogan. And it's so funny because it's the same paper that actually put out this story here, right? This one here about how they took a poll and the Wall Street Journal readers and voters are very unhappy with Trump and the economy. Well, no, Sherlock, no. I mean, we told you, and 16 Nobel Prize winning economists back in 2024 told you prior to Joe Biden dropping out that Donald Trump's economy was going to be far worse than Biden's economy was going to be. But who listened to Joe Biden and those 16 Nobel Prize winning economists? Who listened to them? Who listened to Vice President Harris? But then again, that's all gone now. And I thank you again for joining. What I really want to get to after bringing up those two pieces of information is this weekend. And this weekend's a very important weekend. We've seen the execution of Renee Nicole Good over the last few days, last week. And before that, back on the very last day of this year, which hardly anybody's talking about, but I am going to start talking about a lot more, was the killing of Mr. Kevin Porter, I think his name was, in Los Angeles. A young man who, on New Year's Eve, like everybody, a lot of people do in this country, fired his gun into the air to celebrate the brand new year coming in. And an ICE agent who was off duty went back into his apartment. He happened to live in the same complex as Mr. Porter did. Mr. Porter, a family man, a father of two, well respected in his community in Los Angeles, in Compton, moved to Northridge, had a tremendous family life, had a good family, was a decent person. And even if he wasn't a decent person, that's not really the point, but it's to just illustrate something about Mr. Porter that a lot of people aren't talking about. Certainly the corporate news media isn't, and a lot of people on Substack are not either, but I'm going to be the one of the people who you're going to hear more from on Mr. Porter. Bottom line is that there is an off-duty ICE agent who just happened to live in his apartment complex, same as Mr. Porter's complex. And he went back into his home, put on his ICE gear, and then shot Mr. Porter at least once or twice, killing him. A lot of people don't know about the story. And we don't even know, more than 2 weeks after the murder, I would say, the killing, the execution of Mr. Porter, we don't know the name of the ICE agent. We have no arrest, no anything on this ICE agent who did this. He was off duty, killed him off duty. Killed him. He was off duty at the time, but he put on his ICE gear and executed him. We need to get to the bottom of that. The LA Times has done and I know the LA Times is owned by someone who's not very nice or decent, but the LA Times has done a number of really good stories on this, and one or two stories on this, and there have been others who have, but generally speaking, Kevin Porter, I believe, again, is his first name, I think. You can look it up if I'm not correct. He's lying dead, and his kids don't have a father now, you know? I'll be talking a lot more about that in the future. But this is a very important weekend. And Christy asks if there's an investigation going on. Christy writes that in the chat. We're trying to get that to happen. There are organizations that are trying to get that to happen, Christy. We are not aware that that's really taking place at the moment. And I'm glad you asked the question, Christy, because the LAPD, as Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and others did, smeared Kevin Porter, smeared the dead man. Said all kinds of nasty things about him. Keith Porter, thank you very much, Stacey, for the correction. I had been saying Kevin, and I apologize. I knew it began with K, his name, but thank you very much, Stacey, for getting that information, and I apologize for the inaccuracy. Kevin Porter is not his name. His name's Keith Porter. Thank you. Thank you, Stacey. But the LAPD smeared him. The LAPD, like what we've seen in a lot of cases over the years, smeared the dead person getting killed. It happened with Renee Nicole Good. It happened with Trayvon Martin. It happened with George Floyd. It happened with Breonna Taylor. Yeah, I can go on and on, right? It happened with Eric Garner. Happened with, Amadou Diallo. Happened with Botham Jean. I can go all the way back to the 1960s where this happened. Fred Hampton in 1967. Viola Luiso, a white woman who was killed by the Klan in 1965. J. Edgar Hoover, and I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, and I'll be talking more about this in the future. J. Edgar Hoover smeared Viola Luiso, called her a drug dealer. So understand, this is nothing new, right? Everyone they murder, as Rebecca quite rightly points out, there's a smear campaign against the dead person who's not alive, obviously, to speak for themselves. And people must understand that this is nothing new. And I'm not saying this to throw cold water on what's been happening in Minnesota and what's happened over the last 10 or so days in Minneapolis. But it's to just recognize that there's a long line of this. The authorities smearing someone. Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover, who was in charge of the FBI for more than 50 years, smeared Viola Luiso, a mother of two, came down from Michigan to help black people register to vote, was driving a young black man home when the Klan murdered her in cold blood. And J. Edgar Hoover was putting out things out there like, well, she had these track marks, she was a drug dealer, and it looked like she was having an affair. Again, the thing that's going to obviously get a lot of white people, particularly white people in the South, upset is to suggest when a white woman and a black man are somehow in flagrante delicto, right? That now there's this kind of thing going on between them, and so Hoover just lied his ass off and completely smeared her. So from Viola Luiso to Renee Macklin Good to Keith Porter, who came before, actually. So to Keith Porter to Renee Good, this is not new. This is something that is always done to frame a narrative. Now, what's important about this weekend is you. And why do I say that? Because you have the power. Because you are an endless possibility. And you have to remember that. You are an endless possibility. You have more power than you think you have. And while there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear, at this moment, for all of us, courage is demanded of us. This is our moment. This is this generation's moment. This is our moment. We are all witnesses, but we also all have to be actors. And I don't mean actors as in big screen, Broadway, Oscar nominations, which are coming out on Thursday, and I'll be with you live for those. So stay tuned for that. I do some film stuff too, by the way. But we are the ones in this moment who can act. We have the power to act. We have the power to set an example. At this point, this country's reputation is down the toilet for a lot of people around the world, but we have the power to act. You and I do. And we must do it non-violently. We must do it peacefully, but we must be passionate in our peaceful demonstration against fascism, against authoritarianism, and against wholesale execution. This is what authoritarian, if I can talk properly, this is what authoritarian regimes do. They do open executions. And then the regime slanders and lies about the dead person and then gaslights about what happened. That is what every regime throughout human history has done. And that is the truth. Go look it up. Go look up all of these things. This happens all over the place. And the smearing by government agencies of a dead person, that happens in every regime. Again, and this murder of Viola Luiso in 1965 happened under who? A Democratic president. LBJ. LBJ again with Vietnam. That's why I say people think that when I say these things, it's both sides. It's not a question of both sides. It's a question of a system. And we have the power to put pressure on a system. We really do. And never underestimate your power. That's my central message. That's the point of why I came on here today. And I don't do these lives very regularly or very often. I'm a rather busy person anyway to begin with. But I really think that coming on here to spread a message of hope and positivity and belief, even in these very grim times, is a key thing to do, especially on a weekend like this. It's Dr. King's holiday weekend. And we cannot afford, in my view, to just honor Dr. King. Now, I did honor him on my Politicrat podcast the other day, and I will be doing so again for Monday. But what I did on Thursday and what I'm going to do on Monday, and what I did do in an episode I am yet to release that I did for Friday, which I'm going to release a bit later on, so it's a day behind, is to urge you to act on Monday. And there's lots of ways to do this, whether it's a peaceful, nonviolent protesting, or whether it is something I think even more profoundly. And I'll get to what my more profoundly moment is in a moment. But Victoria has asked a question. A couple of people, Rebecca have. I'm wondering about protesting sitting down. It would be difficult, Rebecca writes, to explain attacking sitting protesters. Thought, question mark. That is Rebecca writing that. Rebecca, I think that it's very important to do protests that are peaceful, whether they are standing or sitting. That certainly has not in the past stopped people from being violent. If you look back in 1965, again in Selma, Alabama, to Sheriff Jim Clark, Sheriff Jim Clark was he was a terrorist, a white man who totally didn't care about peace or nonviolence. Same with Bull Connor in the same state of Alabama, in Birmingham, right? That's not to say that we shouldn't do sitting protesting. I do think sitting protesting is powerful. It sends an even more powerful message. And you're going to have violent thugs like Sheriff Jim Clark in Selma, Alabama back in 65, who was not afraid to crack skulls, and he did. Same thing with Bull Connor, police chief of Birmingham, Alabama, was not afraid or was very cowardly. He was afraid and was cowardly, and he cracked skulls. So I do think seated protesting is effective. It does send a very profound message, and some of the people who are confronted with it behave violently. So if people are going to sit protesting, I think it's a good thing, but be prepared for the possibility that some of these people act in a very violently thuggish way. Now, the best thing to do, again, being peaceful and being seated is very profound. But that's what it has to be. It has to be peaceful. And you will get arrested most likely. And you also have to be aware that if people are going to be sitting when they protest, make sure you know the group that you're with, because there could be some people agitating. How many times have we seen agitators get into protesting and then disrupt it? We've seen this throughout decades. It happened in Dr. King's march, actually, in Selma, and he ended up postponing the march, and stopped it short because there were people being violent. We've seen this so often in history, where we have people look at Black Lives Matter when George Floyd was executed, right? In the same state of Minnesota, what happened? You had some people in protests around the country disrupting them with violence. And it was usually white people, and it was usually white people who were masked. And it happened in Brooklyn, New York, and there were protesters pointing that out. And people drove those so-called protesters out. They were really instigators. So, it's a long-winded answer to your question. I recommend all forms of peaceful protest. I do think that seated protesting is very effective. It is very profound. And 8 times out of 10, the authorities are going to arrest you, and they will do that in a peaceful way. But then, be prepared, excuse me, that there may be people, especially these ICE agents, who might behave thuggishly, and so that's the thing. But that's, it will be difficult to explain attacking sitting protests, and I agree, Rebecca. But look what happened to people like Renee. And I think that one of the sick and evil things about that, out of many, is to make you fearful, right? To do something so brazen like that, so cowardly and evil like that, to execute someone in the cold light of day, because it was an execution. And I use that language. It's obviously murder, but again, as an attorney saying this, murder has to be proved in court. And I know that frustrates the average person in the general public because we all saw what we saw. But murder is actually a legal term. Execution is not, right? You don't get charged with execution. Like there's no charge out there in the world where the district attorney says, we're going to charge you with execution. So that word to me is a better word to use for that reason, because that's exactly what it was. He executed Renee in the cold light of day. And nobody can dispute that. We've seen all the forensic analysis done. The New York Times, by the way, I know a lot of people don't like the New York Times, but I do subscribe to the Times. They do some excellent reporting in a lot of areas. And just because it falls short in some of the more political reporting in some instances, doesn't mean we should throw out the paper completely. There's a lot of great things about the New York Times, even though the standards have slipped over the years with the Times. There's a lot of things still very good about the New York Times. And I think it's a huge mistake. Some of us get very reactionary about this. Oh, let's throw out the Times and let's not. No, no, no. There's actually very good things in some of these newspapers, including this one. There's actually some really good stuff in here. I did talk about this a few days ago with the New York Wall Street Journal doing very in-depth reporting on Epstein, in-depth reporting on Trump and his crime family with all the billions of dollars they've amassed over the last year. There's actually some good reporting in here, despite who owns it. And we shouldn't forsake these as sources. Independent media is absolutely where we have to be. Roland Martin, Joy Reid, Wajahat Ali, Lev Parnas, Zev Shalev, all the others that Ellie Leonard, all the others that I've not mentioned, I apologize. But, we also should also keep our mind open that there are some things occasionally, a lot of times in here, that are actually quite good. They report on this and all the rest of it. So long-winded way to answer your question, Rebecca, but thank you for asking it. And there's another one from Victoria who wrote this a few minutes ago. Victoria writes the following: how can we call for a general economic boycott nationwide? I think that's a very good question as well. I'm opposed to general strikes. I know that's not your question, Victoria, but there's some people on here who are prominent. One or two, I'm not going to mention names. I think you might know who they are, who are screaming about general strike, but not thinking about what the ramifications of that are or is for them and for all of us. Because if everyone did a general strike in this country, we wouldn't really eat. We wouldn't get heating. We wouldn't get our trash taken out. We wouldn't get our benefits if people have benefits or anything. We wouldn't get all these things. If that national strike really worked, it would be a complete and utter failure. But let me address your question, Victoria. Sorry, I have to go off on a tangent for a bit. Victoria, your question is, Victoria writes, once again, how can we call for a general economic boycott nationwide? Here's what I think we can do. I think we can put that forth on our social media platforms and explain to people why that's necessary. Another thing we can do, Victoria, with regard to your question, is to conduct that in our daily lives. Amazon is an obvious one. I've quit Amazon. I've resubscribed to Amazon. I've quit them and I've resubscribed and I've quit them and resubscribed. And I'm going to quit them again as of 3 days from now. Why 3 days? That happens to be the end of the subscription month to month. And it ends up also happening to be 3 days from now. I think it's Tuesday. It happens to be the 1 year of who back in the White House. So, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm holier than thou, act like I haven't subscribed to Amazon, act like, or haven't currently done it, because I think that's just bogus. People who have, great. Then you've never subscribed to Amazon before in your life or quit them 3 years ago. Brilliant. Good. Keep that going. I think that's what you have to do in your everyday life. Target those institutions that donate to this BS that's going on, this authoritarianism, who donated that ballroom, that mess of a ballroom, that monstrosity that he actually destroyed a lot of the White House to build to build. And Microsoft donates to that. Amazon donates to that. Comcast donates to that, right? Apple, I think, donated to that. target these, and we all have iPhones. I have an iPhone. I'm doing this on an iPhone. So, we can do things to curtail our economic involvement, withhold our dollar from those kinds of entities, and practice that and preach it, but actually practice it every day. Dr. King talked about withholding monies from Seal Test Sugar and Domino Sugar and Coca-Cola. He talked about all this stuff on April the 3rd, 1968, literally the day before he would be assassinated. He talked about this at Mason Temple down in Tennessee, down in Memphis, Tennessee. And the funny thing about Dr. King, not the funny thing, but the interesting thing about Dr. King is he was not feeling very well. He was feeling tired. He was down in Tennessee for the garbage worker strike after two employees got horribly mangled in a machine. And he went down there to stand up for the rights of the garbage workers. And the night before, he was not feeling great. He was very tired. He had to be begged to come out of bed, go down to Mason Temple and give that speech that ended in the mountaintop speech. But what he said in the 42 and a half minutes before that, I've seen the promised land and I've been to the mountaintop, was telling Black people, boycott economically, Seal Test Sugar, boycott Domino, boycott Coca-Cola, and how Black people had a purchasing power of, I think, $11 billion at that point. It's a lot more than that now. 11 million or whatever it was at the time. 11 million maybe back in 68, excuse me. And he was telling Black people, boycott these organizations, boycott these entities, pool our resources together to facilitate economic empowerment. If we pool our resources together as Black people, we are a mighty, mighty force. I think Dr. King in that speech pointed out that we, as a nation of Black people alone, as a group of people, would be the eighth or ninth or 11th largest economic power in the world. Black people alone in the United States. So I say that story as a way to answer your question, Victoria, is that we as individuals in this country have to recognize our economic power and potential. And we do that on a national level by first doing it on a local level, by first doing it as individuals, as a family. If you have kids, if you have a family, in general, I'm saying this, if you have kids, you have a family, tell your kids to do the same if you can, depends on how young or old they are. But demonstrate to your children that this is an effective way to fight back, right? It's a nonviolent way to fight back. Holding your dollar is obviously an inherently nonviolent act. But what it does, if we collectively do that, it also has a profound impact on the economy of these companies. Great example of this for everybody watching is Target. Target has reeled since Black people en masse stayed away from Target. And in the year that we've done that, since January of last year, Target share price and market share has gone right down the toilet. Their CEO is leaving in February next month. They've had some changes there, all because they discontinued diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have to stop shopping at places and businesses that stop I hate to use the acronym, that stop doing diversity, equity, and inclusion. McDonald's, Amazon has done this too. They've all stopped. Other companies have as well. AT&T has stopped. Limit your participation with these companies because in some cases, it's very difficult to do it. If you are an Apple person or an iPhone person, it's hard to limit that, but you can find ways to do it. Don't buy accessories for your iPhone then from Apple. Buy them from somewhere else. So I guess, again, and forgive me for being long-winded, Victoria and everybody, it's really important for us to practice it locally and then do it. It becomes national when we do it local. And if you tell everybody on social media feeds that it's important to withhold your money, your economic dollar, your dollar from these companies who are doing these really nefarious things or donating to this regime that's in charge, then if you do that on a daily basis and spread the word on your social media and to people in person that you see offline, it becomes very effective if you tell them that they can do this locally. When you go to Whole Foods, that's owned by Jeff Bezos. Washington Post, owned by him. Don't subscribe to the Washington Post. Don't go to Whole Foods. There's lots of alternatives. Whole Foods may be more expensive or less expensive, but there are other alternatives out there. Support local businesses. That's a great way, Victoria, actually, to call for an economic boycott, generally, nationwide, is to actually encourage people to do everything locally, as I've said, but to support local businesses. That's a great way to empower economically those local businesses that aren't named Amazon, that obviously aren't corporate behemoths like Amazon. Amazon's human rights records, the human rights record of Amazon is awful. And Apple's isn't much better. You know, if you look at China and you look at other, it ain't great. So that's one way to do it as well. To support local businesses, support your local grocery store, support your local bookstore. And I know some of these local bookstores are being taken over by places like Barnes and Nobles, but between ordering a book on Amazon and ordering one on Barnes and Noble, and if you don't have an independent bookstore near you, or you don't have one online near you or anything like that, then pick Barnes and Nobles, pick the lesser, if you will, of the two evils. And I don't like that term. And I know there's been a lot of that about, but pick an organization or a place that, as far as you know, doesn't have any connection to these entities, these regimes, the criminal regime like this one. So thanks for the question, Victoria. And I apologize for being long-winded about it with my answer, but thank you very much indeed. We really do have to really take stock of the remedies we have. And that's where I go back to the power that you and I have economically to withhold our dollar. That's a profound act, and I really appreciate your engagement. I wouldn't propose, Jalen, to delay paying taxes. We all have to pay them. Um, you know, it's so interesting because yesterday, Jalen, and to everyone else watching, the Department of Education actually postponed its garnishing people's wages for any student loan defaults. You may have missed that story yesterday, and you may have missed it last month, or maybe earlier this month even. Trump made it clear that people were going to have their wages garnished if their student loans were in default. And, obviously there was probably a lot of pressure put on the regime because yesterday it came out from CNBC and other places through the Department of Education that they were not going to institute any wage garnishment at this time because they were going to get borrowers of loans that had become default, student loans that become default, to actually have a payment plan, to give them a chance to actually have a payment plan in place. So obviously they've responded with that. But I use that as an example not to delay paying taxes. You have to pay your taxes, and if you pay them late, you don't want the IRS barking at you. You don't want and these entities barking at you. Yes, they will go after people who aren't making billions of dollars, right? Especially this IRS. They're going to go after people who aren't making billions of dollars and who only pay barely any tax. Under Donald Trump, and under the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that got passed, Donald Trump brought down the rate for those who earn over $200,000 of those high earners to 24%. That's a 24% rate. That's the lowest it's been in forever or at all. And remember, back in the 1950s and 60s, the rich in this country were paying 90% plus in taxes. They're 90% in tax. That was their tax rate. Lots have changed, a lot of changes since then. We had Democratic and Republicans in the White House who have actively lowered that tax rate. That's why I keep saying this isn't about one party or another. Obviously, right now, we know which party is doing the damage in this country. That's very, very clear. But this is not a both sides thing. When I say this, again, it's not about both sides. This is about looking at the history that's in front of us. And I think we need to be better students of history. I think that will help too. But I know it was a question. You weren't saying it outright and you weren't recommending this. You were just asking a question, Jalen, and thank you for the question. But I would not propose anything like that. I'd propose paying your taxes and getting that in. I know that whatever the deadline is it the 16th or the 15th of April? I think tax returns have already gone out. Your W-2s have gone out, or your W-4s, whichever one it is. I always get mixed up, W-2, W-4. That's gone out. You should be getting them around this time of the month now. You should have started to receive those either in the mail or in your email or whatever. But that's that one. And Rebecca, glad to hear it. You're much better than I. Rebecca writes, I never had Amazon. Good for you, Rebecca. That's really, really good. It's very, very hard in this day and age to find anyone who has never had Amazon and never used it. It's very rare. And to those of you who have unsubscribed from them, that's really, really good. And Jalen says, my daughter, Jalen writes, is addicted to Amazon. I encouraged her to stop. Well, keep going, Jalen. I know that can be difficult. And I would imagine with your daughter, and I don't know if your daughter's a teenager or whether she's a little bit older than that, a bit younger, but if you have a daughter who's in her teenage years, that's a struggle for you. I'm sure that is. Teenagers, whether they're male or female, right? I mean, it's like when you find that new toy and there's a shiny new object in the room and you just can't, you can't stop looking at it. So, Jalen, thank you for that. I'm going to read out some other things that you might have put up here. Oh gosh, I've just skipped through a number of things. Local and pay with cash. I agree, Rebecca, 100% of that. Thank you, Victoria, for your kind words. The iPhone is a tricky one, Rebecca. I second that emotion. And I'm glad to hear, Victoria, that you do boycott a number of these these entities that are tied to the regime. Yeah, local shops. Absolutely, Rebecca. Rebecca wrote this a few minutes ago. No Target, Walmart, Home Depot, Facebook, etc. Yeah. I had been someone who had been supporting Home Depot last year up until probably around maybe June or July of last year, and I've not supported them since July. I think July of last year, July or August of 2025. And of course, now since then, we've known very well of all the news stories that show you what is happening at Home Depots. And by the way, Keith Porter, who I mentioned earlier, who was absolutely executed by an ICE agent who had been on off duty before he executed Keith Porter. Keith Porter was an employee at a Home Depot in Los Angeles, and he was very popular amongst his fellow colleagues and fellow employees. So again, I'll talk about Keith Porter a lot more on the Politicrat podcast in the next few days and on Alive in the future, because I think a lot more attention needs to be paid to him as well. It's very important that we don't forget about Keith Porter in Los Angeles, California. Very, very important. So yeah, I'm reading through your messages here. Yeah, local and pay cash when you can. Thank you. I'm going to close this on in a few minutes' time. And thank you, Victoria, for your kind words as ever, and for everybody watching. I really wanted to get to finally, and he absolutely was. I agree with you, Victoria, when it comes to Keith Porter, no question about it. Executed, murdered, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. And it needs to get the attention. It needs to get a lot more attention than it's getting. But I'll play a role in that, and everyone watching, has to play a role in that too. Do some research online about Keith Porter and on the circumstances. He didn't make it into 2026. Had a 19-year-old and had a 9-year-old daughter, a girl dad. Should be here. ICE killed 32 people in detention last year, really 33 if you add Keith Porter, because he was never detained. And ICE have continued to kill people in this brand new year. We need to engage. We need to be active. And the last thing I was going to say about Dr. King Day and this weekend in general and every day is that we can go impact locally actions, not only with holding our dollar or giving local companies and businesses and that of the like small businesses our dollar, but also actually doing other things. look in your community, go online and look in your community for events going on Monday. And I would submit to you, rather than going to a dedication of Dr. King, you could do that if you want, obviously, it's up to you. Um, do something in his honor. I talked about this in the Friday episode of The Politicrat, which I'm going to release later today, a day behind. Do something in Dr. King's honor. Go and feed somebody, right? Go to a food bank and donate food if it's open on Monday. Go actually to a food kitchen. Sign up for a shift right now if you can. Go online to a local organization that you know feeds the hungry. Sign up for a shift on Monday. If they're open on Monday, sign up for a shift. Spend 2 or 3 hours or maybe all day feeding people. That's what Dr. King would have wanted us to do. Feed the needy, feed the hungry, people who don't have homes to live in and are sleeping on the streets. You know, that's how you really pay tribute to Dr. King. That's how you honor him, right? You don't honor him by, I mean, you respect him by acknowledging him, and like I've done on my podcast, The Politicrat, and talking about it and playing his speeches and quoting him. Those are nice things, but you really honor him by doing the work that he did, supporting people who are vulnerable, like he did. Went down to Memphis to join and walk and break the picket line and join the picket line, excuse me, for the Memphis garbage workers strike. He literally died. He was assassinated doing the Lord's work, if you will. I'm not particularly religious. I do believe in a higher power. As a Christian, I believe in a higher power as a person, period. But I'm not someone who's religious per se. But Dr. King, literally, his life was brutally ended, literally as he was in the midst of, or in a place where he was doing the work that he always did, stood up for the poor, right? You know, advocated for poor people, advocated for change, advocated to use your economic dollar in a positive way, as I told you earlier when he did the Mason Temple speech on that April 3rd, 1968, the night before his life would be violently ended with an executioner's bullet, an assassin's bullet, right? You know, we have to do the work that Dr. King had been doing, feeding the hungry. Join a food bank, donate to a food bank, get out there and, donate clothes to Goodwill. I mean, you might be doing that already on any given day of the week or year, and that you should continue to do. But on Monday, on Dr. King's holiday, a day of service, as Victoria points out, an important day of service. It's a day on, not a day off. And I'm sure you've heard that term a lot, depending on the circles that you swim in. But the holiday is not a holiday, is my point, right? The holiday is a chance for us to activate ourselves. And there's more than one way for us to do that, right? We can protest nonviolently and peacefully, I highly recommend that, right? But we also can give of ourselves in other ways, like I advocated. Spend time feeding somebody, join an organization, sign up for an organization, go online after I finish this live or right now, take a look online for an organization near you, do some research, find out if they're doing any food banks or feeding people on Dr. King Day, and sign up for something. If you can sign up for it, if they allow for that on a website, sign up for it. I signed up for a shift for an organization here in town the other day for Monday, you know? I'm going to be doing some of that on Monday. Join an organization and feed people who need our help. That's a great way to pay tribute to Dr. King. That's doing his work. And we need to do more of that. We need to be more proactive. And again, never forget the power that you have. It's easy to get down on yourself. In your personal life, you may have some struggles going on, but I'm telling you, I believe in your ability to rise above. There's a lot of things that we all have in our personal lives that can be challenging, or in our families that can be very challenging and very difficult when we're going through a lot of different things. whether it's health situations or other things that are causing us a lot of stress. I want to let you know, though, and I want to reassure you that you will get through this. Whatever this is for you personally, you'll get through it. And then why do I say that? Because you're here in this world right now. It's not only because I believe in you and believe in your ability to do it. I may not know you personally, but I know that you have been through things just like I've been through things. We've all been through things in our lives that test us, our character, our strength, our vulnerability. And you're here. So even in these times, dear viewer, even in these times, you're here. And the fact that you're here is a testament to who you are. The fact that you are here, not again, I don't mean here watching me right now. I mean here on this earth, in this time, says something about you. And it also says that these times are made for you and me. You know the song, "This land is our land, my land, our land. This time, this land is made for you and me." Well, this time is made for you and me. This is not our land; it's Native American land, right? But this time is our time, and this time is made for you and me. And you're made for these times. You are here. Think about this. When you sometimes get down and you get despairing and all this stuff is getting at you, it's designed to make you feel tired and fearful. Think about all the activists out there. Think about all the activists who are out there now. Think about Reverend Dr. William Barber, Bishop Barber, Reverend Barber, Bishop Barber. Think about him. Think about all of these people out here. Tamika Mallory, activist, puts a lot on the line. And I hope you may not know who Tamika Mallory is. She's written at least 2 books. I'm trying to remember one of the names of one of them. Tamika, Tamika Mallory, Mallory, sacrificed a lot, she has, and puts herself on the line every day. Cares about Black people, really a true activist, a true hero. Tamika Mallory, she is one of the greats. And think of all the activist traditions in this country, in our history. Think about the activist soul. The Boston Tea Party came out of activism. It wasn't a party. It was blooming violent. It fomented a revolution. But we have to remain peaceful, nonviolent, and think about the power we have. Think about the people who sacrificed peacefully. Look at the lunch counters. I think it was Victoria, or it might have been Rebecca, who asked the question about being seated. I think it may have been Rebecca. I forget which of you did. Seated protest. Look at the lunch counters in the 1960s during the freedom rides, right? Where you had people sitting at lunch counters, Black people, some white people sitting at those counters as well, mostly Black people, sitting at those lunch counters in the South. And they just sat there in an all-white restaurant, right? At that time, segregation, Jim Crow. They sat there. And what did some of these racist white people do? Throw hot tea on them, hit them over the head with ketchup bottles, right? With bowls of ketchup, all kinds of things, right? And they just sat there and took that in times that are actually tougher than now. Think about it. Because we may not have, and Victoria as, spitting on them, spitting on people who just peacefully assembled under the First Amendment. They actually were observing the Constitution of the United States, the right to peaceably assemble. Now, granted, they did it in a private establishment and obviously in a segregated time, but they showed real courage. You don't think they were fearful? Of course they were. But fearful, being courageous is about having fear and doing the thing anyway, in spite of your fear, right? And these brave people sacrificed a lot during those times in the 60s to get us a civil rights bill, to get us a Voting Rights Act. And we've seen now in 1 year, both of those things basically eroded. The Supreme Court, I'm expecting, is going to put the final nail in the coffin of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But what I'm really talking about here is the activist spirit of this country. It has always been there. And it's almost always been spearheaded by Black people. But white people now really have to get involved en masse, as they did in the anti-war Vietnam movement with Vietnam, as they did in a number of other occasions. But now it really has to be, as it did in George Floyd, by the way. The first time in the history of this country that you had a majority of people favoring a movement, particularly after a Black person was murdered in that movement, executed, right? And you had a lot of white people back in 2020 getting involved. Now that needs to continue. It needs to continue in the name of Keith Porter. It needs to continue in the name of Renee Macklin Good. It needs to continue in the name of anybody, whether they've been killed or not, whether they've been harassed or not, who has been absolutely assaulted by this government. This federal government is conducting an attack on the American public, on any public. The Constitution doesn't only protect people who are citizens. It protects and is supposed to protect everybody that's inside the United States. Whether it's a tourist, whether it's someone who is here, so-called undocumented, whether it's a citizen, or whether it's someone else. That's why I really refuse this idea, this notion of, well, she was a citizen, or, well, it doesn't matter. She was a human being, Renee was. Keith Porter was a human being. Yes, he was an American citizen as well, but he was a human being. And we have to key into our humanity. When in these times where we're isolated and we do the doom scrolling, first of all, we've got to stop the doom scrolling, okay? Do things in this time that give you joy. And I've talked about this before. Do things that give you joy. Do things that give you pleasure. Take a walk if you are able to. Make sure you're amongst nature. Make sure that you read, hopefully a book, and hopefully preferably a book that looks like one of these books as opposed to something on a Kindle. And I know I'm not going to... I had this whole thing online a few weeks ago about this, about what counts as a real book. I know people read a lot of books on Kindle and iPads and all that stuff, and I get it. And I know there are bestseller lists now that aim to target things like this, and Kindle bestseller lists and all that. But come on, a real book is a book that actually has a hardcover on it. But anyway, I don't want to get too far, or paperback. I don't want to get too far off. And I'm glad that there are people in this room like you, Victoria, who, as Victoria writes, I love to read a real book. Oh, Victoria, I am in solidarity with you. I am so simpatico with you right now, Victoria. Oh my gosh. That is so refreshing. I know I'm of a certain age, but I am just so thankful to hear that from Victoria. Victoria, thank you. Real books. And I know some people on social media were biting my head off a few weeks ago, in a very, I think, irrational way, because I'm not beyond criticism, and I don't. Yeah, I don't mind being challenged, and I'm not afraid to make a mistake, and I'm not afraid to admit that I'm wrong. Even more important, I make mistakes. I'm not, it's not that I'm not afraid to make them. I'm not afraid to admit when I've got something wrong, and I'm certainly someone who will completely apologize for getting something wrong. Someone was having a go at me about audiobooks, because I was grousing about audiobooks not being real books. And then someone said to me on social media, on some platform, oh, well, what would you say to blind people? And I said, I wasn't saying anything to blind people. I was just saying something about audiobooks. I was not making a statement about anyone. It was a statement of focus, not exclusion. Again, there's always going to be a bot or a troll, or someone's going to find something to try to disrupt a conversation on, right? If I say that I don't like audiobooks, I'm not saying anything about someone who is blind. You know, I'm saying something about a very specific thing. It's a statement of focus, not exclusion, and it's a statement of focus, not derision or insult. Um, you know, but anyway, I want to stick to this topic, which is to end this now. And thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to this particular Substack. If you like what you see and like what you hear, please subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated. Whether you're a paid subscriber or whether you are a free subscriber, I really appreciate you all the same. But again, I just want to end by saying you've got more power than you think you have. When you have doubts in your life, right? When you have moments of crisis, remember that you are here and you're going to get through this. It will take some time. You have to have your feelings. You have to reflect. You have to have those moments of pain. And you do have to have those moments of vulnerability where you say to yourself, you know what? I can't get through today. This is really tough for me today. It's a tough day. You might have lost a loved one. You might have lost some other person that really means a whole lot to you. And I know people who have really, who've suffered some real loss in their lives, and they've, people really close to them who really, really left a void now with their passing. And, I've talked to some of those people and I've listened to them really carefully and have offered a little bit of advice, a little bit. But listening is so important now, and everybody's talking, just like the old song says, right? Harry Nilsson, everybody's talking at me. I don't hear a word they're saying. Only the echoes of my mind. I know. One song only. I will not do that again anytime soon. But everybody's talking, right? And thank you so much for those kind words, Victoria. She says, this is a wonderful and very positive experience. So thankful for your voice. Victoria, thank you very much for that. And please, Victoria and everyone else watching, spread the word. If you liked what you saw here, and if you like this Substack, spread the word, subscribe to the Substack, whether paid or unpaid. It's fine. I'm not going to make overt appeals to money because this is a tough time economically for lots of us out here. Grocery prices through the roof, your electricity bill through the roof, all that stuff. Your premiums, if you're on Obamacare, for example, through the roof, right? And we have to engage with these politicians locally and statewide and on the federal level. Call into John Thune in the Senate, the Republican, and tell him, put this vote on the floor for Obamacare subsidies for 3 years. The House passed it, yet no Republicans joined the Dems, right? So there's lots of ways we can engage, especially in an era on this platform where there's lots of people doing talking and only a few people doing the actual work or really giving you the information. I've talked about who the people who are actually doing the work are. You need to subscribe to that lot, right? Whether it's Waj, Lev, Zev, all the rest of these folks, you know who I've talked about. You can go back and listen if you missed that, right? Joe Reed doing the work, right? People like this doing the work and getting out there and getting the information, right? Doing an excellent job. And you know who the people who are just yapping away and not really doing anything, right? Everybody's talking. We are in a disinformation age. Everyone's talking, but a lot of people are not doing this. Listening. Listening is an acquired skill, right? And we need to have that. We need to have discernment, thought, careful thought. We cannot afford to be reactionary. We need to be proactionary, right? And we need to do the important things. And I really think that being thoughtful in this moment and not doom scrolling and taking care of yourself with important self-care. I've written a bit about self-care last year. I did that on this podcast, on this Substack. Wrote about mental health and doing good, positive things for your mental health. Self-care is so important. After a long work day, taking a little bit of a break, whether you're working or not, right? If you're someone who isn't presently working, you might have gone out and done some task. You might have taken a walk. You might have gone to the grocery store. You might have come from a friend's house. You might have gone to an event. Come back in and give yourself some grace for 15 minutes. Get into your bed if you're fortunate enough to have a place to call home, right? Because a lot of people in this country don't, right? And give yourself 15 minutes of grace, of peacefulness, of being peaceful and quiet. Just laying down, closing your eyes, and owning 15 minutes of time for you, because that's what this struggle requires. We've had generations of struggle in this country. The late, great John Lewis says that the struggle is something that's not a 1 minute thing, a 1 day thing, a 1 week thing, or a 1 year thing. Struggle lasts a lifetime. And that's our moment now. This is our moment to do the things and to be wise and to be discerning and to be loving and to get out there and really put ourselves forward in a peaceful way and to believe in the power of our power, to believe in yourself. Even when tough things happen, you're here. And that's what matters. The question now is, what are you going to do? And we all have a role to play. We don't have to all protest. We can do all these things at the same time. We can protest and withhold our economic dollar. We can protest, withhold our economic dollar, and feed the hungry. We can protest, hold our economic dollar, feed the hungry, and we can throw some of the clothes that we don't use. Hopefully they're clean, right? The clothes that we don't use anymore, donate them, because there are lots of people who need clothes. There are lots of places where you can donate clothes on Monday or any day. We need to be in a tradition of giving. We need to be in the tradition of loving. We need to restore our humanity and connect back to it, because I sometimes think that a lot of social media is about berating someone. It never used to always be that way, but some of these platforms, and you know which ones I'm talking about, are about trolls and bots and berating people and attacking them and being misogynistic and being racist and all of those kinds of things. We cannot give up now. As I think pointed out by Victoria here, we cannot give up and we cannot give in. Victoria writes, we don't know what's around the corner. We've got to keep trying, because it's absolutely better than capitulating this tyranny. 100%. Victoria, that's exactly right. I totally agree with you as the sun shines in here in the city. Let the sun shine. Oh, you can tell that I'm not a young man. I've got that on vinyl, by the way. The Fifth Dimension. I actually have. See, I'm old enough to have that on vinyl, right? I might actually play that after I finish this live. Still a bit early, but I might play that. Let the sunshine in, right? The Age of Aquarius, right? Boy, the Fifth Dimension were really good. Oh, up and away. Oh, anyway. For those of you of a certain age, you know what on earth I'm talking about. And those of you who are not of a certain age, please look online for the Fifth Dimension. And that's spelt with the number 5 and then TH, Fifth Dimension. So you might have a clue of what on earth I was just talking about. Yvette writes, and thank you, Yvette, for joining. It's great to see you here, as always. Yvette writes, donate to food banks if you are able as well. And before Yvette, before you came in, I talked about that very thing before you came in, is to donate to food banks. And Yvette, you're quite right. Echoing something I said before you come in. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Yvette. As I mentioned, donate to food banks. Really important to do that. Give your time to feeding people on Dr. King Day or any day when you can. And whether you are working or whether you're not working at the moment, give yourself some grace. You might be deciding that you want to rearrange your house or rearrange your apartment, or there's something about your apartment you don't like, so you clean it, obviously you tidy it up, or you do something like that. When you finish that task, however long it is, or you want to clean out your closet or clear out things, I like to continuously, reinvigorate the living space. That's very important, and that takes some time sometimes. And that's okay, Yvette. No problem about missing the beginning. You can always venture back to the start and you'll see all of this. But thanks for the contribution as always. Always appreciate you and everyone else who comes into these lives. Re-energizing your living space is very important, and keeping clutter away is very important. I think that is so important for your mental health. Living spaces, keeping your living spaces clean and clear, especially now, is very important. And Victoria mentioned this before. We cannot afford to capitulate and roll over. That's the whole idea. The long game of this regime is to make it harder for you to vote. And I'll talk about voting in a separate live. And you see over my shoulder Muhammad Ali, the late great Muhammad Ali, who sacrificed a lot for this country, um, as one of the great patriots of this country, Muhammad Ali. And it is our fight to vote. We've got to vote. And I'll talk about voting in a subsequent Substack Live. And obviously what the attack is and what the play is. And one of the headlines yesterday that you may have missed is that a federal court said that ordered the Department of Justice, said the Justice Department cannot compel California to turn over its voting roll of all 23 million of its registered voters. It cannot. Justice Department has sued California, and the federal judge dismissed that suit and said, no, Pam Bondi, you cannot expect that California is going to turn over its entire voting roll. 23 million voters on that voting roll out of 39 million people. You cannot expect the Secretary of State of California, Shirley Weber, Weber, to turn over the entire voting roll for you and to you. And you want voter information? You want all this other stuff? Personal info? Who they're registered with, the voters? Which person they vote? No. And so the federal court did that yesterday. Now, I'll talk about voting at another time. But a reminder, do something that actually honors Dr. King, affirmatively honors him, not just remembering what he said and what he did, but actually going out there, whether it's protesting peacefully like he did, whether it's actually feeding people, whether it's, donating clothing, donating to food banks, whatever it is, in a positive way that affects someone else's life, that changes their life, that puts a smile on their face. Make sure you do it on Monday or any other day, right? And self-care. Take care of yourself, please. You only have this life, right? I know there's some people who believe in reincarnation. Shirley MacLaine famously does, and so many people do. I'm not mocking that, but what I am saying is, whatever you believe, right? Right now, you're living this life, right? You have to really take care of yourself, especially now. And if you're not healthy, or if you're not healthier, if you're not eating the way you should be eating, and I'm never going to tell you that you must eat this, but, eating healthier definitely helps you. And getting sleep, as I've said before here, is definitely important. Definitely important. Sleep governs everything, and especially as you get older. Sleep really governs everything. Sleep determines what kind of day you're going to have, quite frankly. Sleep determines a lot of things in life, and people overlook that about sleep. And you can't sustain yourself in a struggle against tyranny and fascism if you're not healthy, and definitely if you're not getting sleep. Now, we all have health challenges. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm saying that if you're drinking lots of alcohol, for example, and again, there might be factors beyond your control with genetics that lead to that, right? But I'm just saying that if you're, doing a lot of things that are unhealthy in your life, it's going to affect how you get through a day, right? And there's lots of external factors as well. But my point is, I want you to be good to yourself. Because as George Michael said, and I'm not going to sing this from one of his songs, be good to yourself because nobody else has the power to make you happy. Now, that's one of the lyrics from one of his songs, which is called Heal the Pain. But be good to yourself, right? And happiness comes from within. Happiness comes from within. And there are people who might make you feel happier, but true happiness comes from within you. Your spouse might make you happier. Your significant other might make you happier, but true happiness comes from within, and nobody has the power to do that than you. And we've got to really eliminate the doom scrolling and the reacting to every little thing that gets said. That's why I tried not to, at the beginning of this, to spend too much time on the topic that I spent time on, which for those of you who came in late, you'll have to find out what I mean by that, because that stuff is just fluff and distraction. What we have to do is very clear, because our mission is clear. We have to stamp our names in history as the people who resisted all of this. What will the history books say decades from now about us in this moment? Ignore the trolls, ignore the worry bots, have your feelings, express your feelings, and admit that you are feeling you know, powerless perhaps at times, but never forget that you're not powerless. The regime wants you to think that you are. You have immense power. As I said before, you are an endless possibility. I want you to take that final message out of this particular life today. You are an endless possibility. And never forget that you have much more power than you think you do. There are small things that you can do that make a huge difference. One of them is peaceful protest. One of them is contacting these local and state and federal politicians. One of them is doing something to lift people who are not as fortunate as you or I are. These things contribute to mental health in a very positive and profound way. And I want you to understand that your potential is absolutely limitless. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Yvette, for your comment. Really appreciate it. And if you liked what you saw once again today, please subscribe here. Spread the word on your Substack about this Substack and about the Politicrat podcast. I'll be releasing Friday's episode today, a day behind, but I do want you to listen to that once it comes out a little bit later. Please restack this. Thank you, Gilda, for your kind words. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, spending time out of your precious Saturday. Whatever you choose to do with your day, do it well and have fun with it. Smile, laugh, joy. I think Victoria, someone else pointed out, joy, music, so important. Music is very important. Singing, even if you sing as terribly as I do, very important. You got to do it. I had a situation with someone who contacted me recently, was really, really down. And I mentioned to this person a song, and it turned the person's mood around. Really did. And that person started to sing. I mentioned a couple of particular songs. And not only did that person start to sing along with me on the phone, that person then proceeded to put on the very song that I recommended. And that person began to sing it, and I sang it as it was playing as well, over the phone. Never underestimate your own power. Even as you may feel a bit down at the moment, as the saying goes, joy cometh in the morning, but we have to do the work, right? And we have to get out there and we have to peacefully resist, peacefully protest, right? Peacefully do these things. Ignore all the doomsayers and all the negative nabobs who just think that, oh, this is inevitable. The people in your chats and in your social media stream who say, oh, I'm scared, but they never offer any other alternative. Yeah, people are scared. We're all scared, I'm sure. But courage is what we must have, right? And be discerning about who you're listening to out here. I've always said this for a number of years, couple of years now. We are living, I say, in a disinformation age. Artificial intelligence is part of that, right? Social media and bots and trolls are part of that. The right wing are part of that. Let's really focus on investing in humanity, in each other, and on the limitless potential of each and every one of us. Dear listener, thank you very much. Dear viewer, thank you. I'll be doing this again. I don't know when, at some point. Please restack this if you liked it. Spread the word to all your followers, folks. And please subscribe, whether paid or unpaid. Please subscribe. That would be greatly appreciated. And thank you, everyone, for the last, hour or so, that I've been doing this. Take good care. And from all of you and from me to all of you, please have a very good weekend and act in the tradition of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Take care, everyone. I'm signing off now. Omar saying, have a very good day and take care. You've been listening to Omar Substack, watching Omar Substack. And again, have a very good afternoon and a good day and a great King weekend.